A guy who started Village Health Works, his name is Deo Gracias Nizonkiza, and one thing that's neat about our project is that he's from Burundi, so we actually started this project in his home village where he's from. We're establishing a 17-acre medical campus right now, teaching locals to practice Western medicine. So everything from malnutrition to maternity ward to everything you can name, we treat people for free. So what I was there doing was to serve malnutrition, or to do away with malnutrition. Only 17% of the whole country of Burundi has food security. Food security is essentially knowing where your food's coming from in the next X amount of time. So food is very insecure there, which is a huge issue. So lots of very emaciated people, children especially, running around. This is in our nutrition ward. It's a 4-part program, so there's intravenous feeding, and then there's something called plumpy nut we feed them, which is a nutritional product, kind of a mixture, and then we kind of make a mash to feed them. And then the 4th stage is the stage that we went to AllPeopleBeHappy for to help develop, which is specifically teaching sustainable agriculture and nutrition, and how to decrease food insecurity. Next slide, please. Slash and burn agriculture, which I'm sure you guys have heard about, not productive for the environment or the people. You end up depleting the soil, and it's not a productive way to do it. This is what topography ends up looking like. This, at one point, this was a lush jungle. It's right across Lake Tanganyika from East Congo. So this was like snakes, gorillas, one big canopy of lush jungle, like what we would think of as jungle. And now it looks like this. People cut down everything that grows. Slide. As you might expect, lots of poor kids in Burundi. World Bank is pretty consistently rated Burundi is the poorest country in the world by GDP, lowest GDP per capita in the world. Terrible health indicators, post-war nation, really tough time there. See a lot of kids. First thing we did was built a nursery that involved, so now this was before we got money from AllPeopleBeHappy Foundation, and this was basically me and 8 guys chopping down some eucalyptus trees and palm thatch and building what we could with it. So they'd never done the nursery model before. Slide. So essentially what we were doing is this was our first nursery structure. We now have several. We used some scrap wood from building the hospital. We built these seed trays. We were doing annuals in the middle, and then doing perennials down the side, doing tree crops. We grew a whole bunch of different veggies, probably everything you could name, and then a whole bunch of other local stuff too. Next slide, please. This is Bosco. He was my right-hand man. One thing I think is really important, and now everyone at our site does, is growing perennial food crops and trees, as opposed to just teaching someone to grow 1 tomato or 1 lettuce. This is a tree called Moringa oleifera. Another name for it is miracle tree. It grows to be about 20 feet tall, and you can eat the leaves. It's really highly nutritious, really neat plant. You can do some other things with it, but that's its primary use. We propagated tens of thousands of these and planted them out and distributed them through our program. This is after the AllPeopleBeHappy funding. We were able to scale up a little bit. Next slide, please. Here's Bosco again. These are some other nursery structures. So essentially the model we were teaching is have a small area where you just baby the heck out of your veggie starts. Can you guys see? Am I blocking everybody here?
No, we're fine.
And then preparing some space outside of your nursery where you can grow things in full sun. But that was entirely new to people in Burundi, so that was pretty productive. These are some papayas in the foreground, something else in the background, looks like maybe tomatoes or brassicas or something. So they hadn't built raised beds before. So typically how things would work is I would do something. I would build a few beds. They're super smart people. They'd pick it up really quickly, and they've been working with hose their whole life, so it wasn't like real steep learning curve on that one. But so I would do the first few, and then they'd follow suit, and they'd scale it up big time. So this was in our demonstration garden. Next slide. So our demonstration garden is a 25 meter by 25 meter garden. We planted a tree called Coleandra around the outside, which is a nitrogen fixing tree, really good for the soil. You can also feed the leaves to animals, so growing animal fodder vertically as opposed to just letting cows and goats and things graze with no fences, which is how it works a lot of times in developing countries. So we grew a whole bunch of different crops and tried to keep things pretty tight to show people how to do it. Next slide, please. So we grew cucurbits and we grew nightshades and any seeds we could find, we grew them pretty much. those are some tomatoes. Next slide. So also one of the neat things about the coriander is that it's a living fence now. You can weave the coriander together, so then it's a living fence, so you don't have to cut down palm every few months to keep animals out. Next slide. To name a few varieties, this is called Tofrosia, which is a natural insecticide. So instead of people, walking 2 days to Ramonge, a city that's a ways away, and buying some really expensive chemical pesticide, they can grow this stuff, chop it up, and throw it in a bucket of water, and a few days later they have a pesticide they can spray on the plants. Really productive, easy to use. We taught seed saving. So instead of just bringing seeds over and giving one-time seed packets away, we're trying to teach people to grow seeds for themselves, so it's a more sustainable model. So seed saving is a large piece of what we're doing. This looks like passion fruit, papaya, peppers, Artemisia annua, pigeon pea, that looks like lab bean, okra. So we were teaching all kinds of different seed saving, which they loved. The Kirundi word for seed is imbuto, and now they just treat imbuto like they're gems, like they're gold. So the neat thing about our program is that I'm not there anymore, and it's still going on. So the program has scaled up substantially thanks to the AllPeopleBeHappy Foundation. But now what it looks like is local community agriculture leaders are teaching what they've learned. Composting instead of buying expensive fertilizers, some of which actually aren't so good for the life of the soil over time. Anyways, we taught composting, which they thought I was totally nuts because they hadn't heard of that. Next slide. We started harvesting compost and using it, and they saw that it was really productive. And now you're starting to see compost piles pop up all over the place. Next slide. Here's one here. That's Eddie. He created a compost pile in his home. He's really proud of. Slide. We started developing. So at the clinic, people will come through our malnutrition ward, and as the fourth stage of the malnutrition program, they come into the food security program. So we try to equip them with the knowledge of how to grow their own food. We also send people home to establish home gardens so that people can grow their own food, and we can kind of boost them off the ground. We do one-time seed donation, donate some trees to them. This is at someone's house where we're planting out a little nursery. Next slide. And this was a proud day. This was after not too long of being there. I started walking around the village, and we started seeing these little nurseries popping up all over the place. So I have nothing to do with it, but they're taking ownership on this stuff. And they're using these principles in their own lives. This was one I had nothing to do with, and I was like so proud. This was the production garden. We designed to have kind of 3 lobes. Well, so first of all, we're trying to teach sustainable models, right? So we're trying to teach sustainable models. So with this one, we're taking manure from the animals, putting it in the garden, and then taking food from the garden, feeding it to the animals, right? Closed loop. Same with the compost. Stuff from the garden, composting it, putting it back into the garden, so they don't ever leave sight for that system. We planted a whole bunch of trees around these 3 garden areas and a bunch of annuals in the middle. Next slide, please. This kind of just as it's growing. You can just click through these next ones. So essentially we did the same thing with this larger garden that we did with the smaller one. You started growing a bunch of food. These are pictures they've sent over to me since then. So this, remember I mentioned moringa. They dehydrate the moringa leaves and they make a moringa powder. So now they can mix that with the cassava or the manioc. They call it ubugale. This disgusting stuff that they just love. It's like a kind of a mushy kind of white mush. They can now mix this powder in, and it's good for them. It has protein and a whole bunch of trace minerals, and it's more productive to eat. Here's Bosco processing some. Next slide, please. These are some guys in the clinic, so we're looped in with the clinic so that people are coming through the clinic and coming into our agriculture program, and we also are going into the clinic and teaching about nutrition. Next slide. Here's Deo. This is one of the new cooperatives. The women cooperatives they're using space on our land to grow food and to propagate nursery plants. Next slide, please. Here's some women working in the field, proud of their work. Next slide. This was a home garden taken recently. This is Pascal at the primary school. We developed a school garden, which the kids now maintain, with a little nursery over here, a food forest around about 20 beds. The kids love it. And malnutrition is still a huge problem in Burundi, but we're doing the best we can to amend that with the help of the AllPeopleBeHappy Foundation. So that's where we're at today.